The rain hammered against the windows of the small diner on Maple Street, creating rivers that distorted the neon signs outside. It was nearly midnight on a Thursday, and the place was almost empty except for a few stragglers nursing cold coffee and memories. Maya wiped down the counter for what felt like the 100th time that shift, her feet aching in the worn sneakers she'd been meaning to replace for months. At 28 years old, she had been working at Danny's diner for 6 years, ever since she dropped out of community college to help her mother with medical bills. The bell above the door chimed, and Maya looked up to see a man in an expensive charcoal suit step inside, shaking water from his umbrella. He looked completely out of place in the modest diner, like a peacock that had wandered into a chicken coop. His silver hair was perfectly styled, and even from across the room, Maya could tell his watch cost more than she made in a year, maybe 2 years. He glanced around the diner with an expression she couldn't quite read, something between curiosity and mild discomfort, before settling into a booth near the window. Maya grabbed a menu and walked over, putting on her professional smile. The one she'd perfected after thousands of shifts, the one that said she was friendly but not too friendly, helpful but not desperate for tips. She'd learned early on that people could sense desperation, and it made them uncomfortable. Better to seem content, even when you were counting pennies to make rent. The man looked up at her, and she noticed his eyes were a striking blue, the kind that seemed to look right through surface pleasantries and see something deeper. He smiled, and it seemed genuine, reaching the corners of his eyes in a way that suggested he didn't smile often but meant it when he did. "Good evening," Maya said, placing the menu in front of him. "Can I get you started with something to drink?" "Coffee, please," he replied, his voice smooth and cultured. "Black, no sugar." Maya nodded and turned to get his coffee, aware that her other customers, the regulars who came in every Thursday night, were watching this interaction with interest. In a neighborhood like theirs, a man in a suit that expensive was entertainment, a break from the usual routine. She poured the coffee into a clean mug, grabbed the pot to bring for refills, and returned to his table. "Here you go," she said, setting down the mug. "Have you decided what you'd like to eat, or do you need a few minutes?" The man glanced at the menu briefly, then back at her. "What do you recommend?" It was a simple question, one she got asked a dozen times a shift, but something about the way he asked made it feel different. Like he genuinely wanted to know what she thought, not just making conversation while he decided what he actually wanted. "The is good," Maya said honestly. "It's my uncle's recipe, he's the cook tonight. The pie is homemade too if you're interested in dessert, apple or cherry." "I'll have the please," he said, handing her back the menu. "And I'll definitely save room for that pie." Maya wrote down his order and headed to the kitchen, where her Uncle Danny was manning the grill. Danny had owned the diner for 30 years, and while it wasn't much to look at, he took pride in the food. He looked up when she came in, raising an eyebrow. "Fancy guy out there," Danny said, flipping a burger. "What's his story?" "No idea," Maya replied, clipping the order to the wheel. "Just once." "Oh, man has good taste." Maya returned to the floor, checking on her other customers, refilling coffee, bringing checks. The usual rhythm of work that she could do half asleep by now, but she found herself glancing at the man in the suit more often than usual. He was looking out the window, watching the rain, his expression thoughtful. There was something about him that suggested he carried the weight of many decisions, many responsibilities. When the was ready, Maya brought it out along with mashed potatoes and green beans. She set the plate in front of him carefully. "This looks excellent," he said, and again he sounded like he meant it. "Enjoy," Maya said, starting to turn away. "Excuse me," he said, and she turned back. "Would you mind sitting with me for a moment, if you're not too busy, of course?" Maya glanced around the diner. It was late and her other customers were settled. Her uncle could handle things for a few minutes. Still, it was an unusual request. Customers sometimes wanted to chat, sure, but they didn't usually ask her to sit down. Sure," she said, sliding into the booth across from him. "Is everything okay with the food?" "Everything's perfect," he assured her. He took a bite of the, nodding appreciatively. "Your uncle is talented." "I'll tell him you said so." The man set down his fork and looked at her directly. "I'm going to be honest with you about something, and I hope you won't find it strange." Maya felt a small flutter of concern. This was usually when things got weird, but she maintained her calm expression. "Okay." "My name is Richard," he said, and Maya recognized the name immediately. Anyone who read newspapers or watched the news would. Richard was one of the wealthiest men in the country, a billionaire who had built his fortune through a combination of tech investments, real estate, and what financial magazines called an almost supernatural ability to predict market trends. She'd seen his face on magazine covers in the waiting room at her mother's doctor's office. She must have shown her recognition because he smiled slightly. "I see you've heard of me." "Yes, sir," Maya said, suddenly very aware of the coffee stain on her apron. "Please don't call me sir. Richard is fine." He took another bite of seeming to genuinely enjoy it. "I come to places like this sometimes when I need to think, when I need to remember what's real." Maya wasn't sure what to say to that, so she just nodded. "I've been having a problem lately," Richard continued. "Despite having access to the best financial advisors money can buy, despite having teams of analysts and experts, I feel like I've lost touch with something essential. Do you know what I mean?" "Not really," Maya admitted. "I don't have financial advisors." He laughed at that, a genuine sound. "No, I suppose you wouldn't, but that's exactly why I wanted to talk to you." Maya was thoroughly confused now. "I don't understand." "I've been considering a major investment," Richard explained. "Something that would involve several $1 billion. I've heard all the expert opinions, seen all the projections and models. But I realized something tonight driving around in the rain trying to make this decision. All those experts live in the same world I do. They see things from the same angle. They have the same blind spots." "And you think I can help with that?" Maya asked skeptically. "I think you might offer a perspective I haven't considered," Richard said. "You work hard, you manage your finances carefully, I assume. You live in the real world in a way that I, frankly, don't anymore. Sometimes the simplest wisdom is the most valuable, and we overlook it because it doesn't come wrapped in a PowerPoint presentation." Maya leaned back against the booth, processing this. Part of her thought this had to be some kind of joke or prank. But Richard seemed completely serious, and there were no cameras that she could see, no crew waiting to jump out and laugh at her. "What's the investment?" she asked. Richard pulled out his phone and brought up some information. "A company called Gene. They're developing personalized nutrition plans based on genetic testing. The idea is that they analyze your DNA and create custom meal plans, supplements, and dietary recommendations based on your genetic predispositions. The science is solid, they have good leadership, and the market potential is enormous. Health-conscious consumers with disposable income." He showed her some charts and figures, though Maya could barely make sense of them. She saw a lot of upward trending lines, which she assumed was good. "Every advisor I have says it's a sound investment," Richard continued. "Low risk, high potential return. The company is poised for rapid growth. All the indicators are positive." "So what's the problem?" Maya asked. "That's what I'm trying to figure out," Richard admitted. "Something doesn't feel right, but I can't put my finger on it. All the data says yes, but my gut says wait. And I've learned over the years to respect my instincts, even when I can't explain them." Maya thought about this. She looked at the charts again, at the company name, at the concept. Then she looked up at Richard. "Can I be honest?" she asked. "Please." "I don't know anything about billion-dollar investments," Maya said. "But I can tell you what I think about this, just as a regular person." "That's exactly what I'm asking for." Maya took a breath. "Okay, so this company, they want to test people's DNA and tell them what to eat, right?" "Essentially, yes." "And that costs money, probably a lot of money." "The initial test and consultation package is about $1,500, Richard confirmed. Then there are ongoing subscription fees for updated plans and supplements." Maya nodded slowly. "See, here's the thing. Most people I know, we're not paying $1,500 to find out what to eat. We're trying to figure out how to afford what's already on our plates. We know we should eat more vegetables and less junk food. We don't need a DNA test to tell us that. We need time and money, two things we don't have enough of." Richard was listening intently, his forgotten. "And the people who do have that kind of money to spend on this," Maya continued, warming to her subject, "they're already eating well, mostly. They have time to cook, money for good groceries, probably personal trainers and nutritionists already. So you're selling an expensive solution to people who either can't afford it or don't really need it." "The company would argue that their service is for the affluent, health-conscious consumer who wants optimization, not just adequacy," Richard said, but he sounded like he was testing the argument rather than defending it. "Maybe," Maya said, "but here's another thing. People are tired of being told they're broken and need fixing. We're tired of products that promise to solve all our problems if we just buy the right thing. A DNA test that tells you you're genetically predisposed to need more vitamin D or whatever, it's just another way of saying there's something wrong with you that you need to pay to fix. And people are starting to see through that. She paused, worried she'd said too much. This was a billionaire sitting across from her, and she was essentially telling him his investment idea was bad. But Richard was nodding thoughtfully. I hadn't considered it from that angle, he admitted. The marketing research showed strong interest in the target demographic. People say they're interested in a lot of things, Maya replied. Doesn't mean they'll actually pay for it, or that they'll keep paying for it after the novelty wears off. How many people do you know who bought expensive exercise equipment that's now collecting dust? Richard smiled, point taken. There's one more thing, Maya said, deciding to go all in. And this might be way off base, but you asked for my opinion. Go ahead. This whole thing feels like it's about making rich people feel special, like they're doing something smarter than everyone else with their food. But food shouldn't be about that. Food should be about nourishment and enjoyment and community. The best meals I've ever had weren't expensive or optimized or personalized. They were just good food shared with people I cared about. That you're eating. There's no DNA test that would make it better. It's good because my uncle makes it with care and people enjoy it. Richard looked down at his plate, then back at Maya. You've given me a lot to think about. I'm sorry if I overstepped, Maya said quickly. You asked for my thoughts and I just... Don't apologize, Richard interrupted. This is exactly what I needed to hear. Do you know why? Maya shook her head. Because you're not trying to sell me anything. You're not trying to impress me or tell me what you think I want to hear. You're being honest, and that's incredibly rare in my world. He pulled out his phone and made a few notes. You've identified issues that none of my analysts raised. Not because they're not smart, but because they're looking at data and market research, not at human nature and real behavior. Danny called from the kitchen that an order was up, and Maya started to slide out of the booth. I should get back to work. Of course, Richard said, but Maya, may I ask you something else? She paused, sure. How did you develop this way of thinking, this clarity about what matters and what doesn't? Maya considered the question. I guess when you don't have much money, you get good at figuring out what's real value and what's just expensive. You learn the difference between what you need and what someone's trying to sell you. And you learn that the best things in life usually can't be bought anyway. Richard smiled, and there was something almost sad in it. I used to know that. It's easy to forget. Maya went back to work, and Richard finished his meal in thoughtful silence. When he was ready for the check, she brought it over. The total was $18.50. He handed her his credit card, and when she returned with the receipt, he'd written in a tip of $500. Mr. Maya said, her eyes wide, this is too much. It's not nearly enough for what you've given me tonight, he replied, standing up. You may have just saved me from making a very expensive mistake. More than that, you reminded me of something I'd forgotten about, how to evaluate what's truly valuable. He put on his coat and picked up his umbrella. I come through this city regularly. Would it be all right if I stopped by again? I'd value your perspective on other matters if you're willing. Maya was still staring at the tip line. $500 would cover her mother's medication for 2 months. You want to come back and ask me about business stuff? I want to come back and have good and talk to someone who sees the world clearly, Richard said. If that leads to discussions about business, so be it. But mainly, I'd just appreciate the conversation. Okay, Maya said, still somewhat in shock. We're here most nights. Good, Richard extended his hand and Maya shook it. His grip was firm and warm. Thank you, Maya, truly. After he left, Maya stood at the window watching his car pull away, a sleek black vehicle that probably cost more than her apartment building. Danny came out from the kitchen, wiping his hands on a towel. What was that about? He asked. I have no idea, Maya replied honestly. But Uncle Danny, I think I just gave investment advice to a billionaire. Danny laughed. Well, did you charge him for it? Maya showed him the tip, and Danny's eyes went wide. Good Lord, girl, what did you tell him? Just the truth, Maya said. Just what seemed obvious to me. Well, whatever it was, he valued it. Danny clapped her on the shoulder. Never underestimate what you know, Maya. You're smarter than you give yourself credit for. That night after her shift ended and Maya was walking to her car through the rain-washed streets, she couldn't stop thinking about the conversation. She'd never considered that her perspective, the view from her life of careful budgets and hard choices, might be valuable to someone like Richard. She'd always thought of wealthy people as having all the answers, all the advantages. It had never occurred to her that they might have blind spots that someone like her could see around. When she got home to her small apartment, her mother was asleep in the bedroom they shared. Maya quietly put the $500 tip in an envelope marked medicine, then sat at the kitchen table with a cup of tea. She thought about what Richard had said about losing touch with what's real. She thought about the Gene Company and her gut reaction to it. She wondered if he would actually take her advice or if this had just been an interesting diversion for him, a break from his usual world. She thought about her own life, the struggles she faced every day that someone like Richard never had to think about. But she also thought about the things she had that maybe he didn't. The satisfaction of her uncle's pride in his cooking, the regulars at the diner who knew her name and asked about her mother, the simple pleasure of a job well done, even if it was just wiping down tables and refilling coffee cups. These weren't small things, she realized. They were real things, solid things. Things that didn't depend on market trends or stock prices. Maya didn't know if Richard would really come back to the diner. Rich people said a lot of things they didn't mean. She'd learned that from serving them over the years. But something in his eyes when he talked to her had seemed genuine. He'd seemed almost lonely, despite all his wealth and success. Like someone who'd climbed so high he could barely see the ground anymore and needed someone to remind him what it looked like down there. She finished her tea and got ready for bed, setting her alarm for the early shift tomorrow. As she drifted off to sleep, she smiled, thinking about how strange life was. This morning, she'd been worried about making rent. Tonight, she'd advised a billionaire on a multi-billion-dollar investment. If nothing else, it would make a good story to tell her mother in the morning. What Maya didn't know, as she fell asleep in her modest apartment, was that Richard was sitting in his penthouse across the city, unable to sleep, making notes on his phone. He was thinking about everything she'd said, turning her words over in his mind like precious stones, examining them from every angle. He was thinking about the Gene investment and realizing that she was right. He was thinking about all the other investments he'd made over the years, wondering how many of them had been based on data and projections, rather than on understanding real human behavior and needs. But more than that, he was thinking about the calm certainty in Maya's 3 weeks past before Richard returned to the diner, and in that time, Maya had almost convinced herself that the whole encounter had been a strange dream. The $500 was real enough, though. She'd used it to pay for her mother's medications and had even managed to buy herself a new pair of work shoes. The old ones had finally given up entirely, the sole separating from the upper like a mouth opening to speak. It was a Tuesday evening, the dinner rush winding down, when the bell above the door chimed and Richard walked in. He was dressed more casually this time, in dark jeans and a simple button-down shirt, though Maya could tell the clothes were expensive from the way they fit. He caught her eye and smiled, and Maya felt a strange flutter in her chest that she immediately pushed down. This was just a customer, she reminded herself. An unusual customer, sure, but still just someone passing through. "Welcome back," she said, grabbing a menu. "Same booth." "If it's available," Richard replied, following her across the diner. Several of the regulars looked up with interest, recognizing him from his previous visit. Word had gotten around about the generous tip, and there had been speculation about who he was and what he'd wanted. Maya had kept the details to herself, just saying he was a businessman passing through. Richard settled into the booth, and Maya placed the menu in front of him. "Coffee black." "You remember," he said, looking pleased. "It's my job to remember," Maya replied, though truthfully she would have remembered anyway. "You didn't forget a conversation like the one they'd had. I'll be right back." When she returned with his coffee, Richard was looking at the menu, but he set it aside when she approached. "How have you been, Maya?" "Good," she said. "Busy, the usual. How about you?" "Interesting, actually," Richard said. "I wanted to thank you again for your advice about Gene." "Did you invest?" Maya asked, curious despite herself. "No," Richard said. "I pulled out of the deal entirely, and it turns out you were even more right than you knew. I had my team do some deeper digging after our conversation, looking at things from the angle you suggested. The company's customer retention numbers were terrible. People were signing up, trying the service for a few months, then canceling. The company was hiding this with aggressive new customer acquisition, but it wasn't sustainable. Within 2 years, they would have been in serious trouble. Maya felt a small surge of pride mixed with disbelief. Really? Really, you saw through to the fundamental flaw in the business model that my analysts had missed because they were too focused on the technology and the market size. They forgot to ask the simple question, will people actually keep paying for this? Richard took a sip of his coffee. I would have lost about $2 billion if I'd gone through with that investment. The number was so large that Maya couldn't quite process it. $2 billion. She couldn't imagine having that much money, let alone losing it. I'm glad I could help, she said, feeling inadequate. What else could she say? You did more than help, Richard said seriously. You made me reconsider how I evaluate opportunities. I've started asking different questions now, not just what does the data say, but what do people actually need and want? It seems obvious when you say it out loud, but it's easy to forget when you're surrounded by spreadsheets and projections. Danny called from the kitchen that an order was ready, and Maya excused herself to deliver it. When she came back, Richard was ready to order. He chose the again, and Maya couldn't help but smile. Becoming a regular, she observed. I like knowing what to expect, Richard said. There's comfort in that. As the evening went on, Maya found herself stopping by Richard's booth whenever she had a free moment. They talked about small things at first, the weather, the city, changes in the neighborhood. But gradually the conversation deepened. Richard told her about his business, about the pressure of being responsible for thousands of employees and billions in assets. Maya told him about her mother's illness, about dropping out of college, about the dreams she'd put on hold. Do you ever regret it? Richard asked. Leaving school. Maya thought about it, really thought about it, before answering. Sometimes, she admitted. I wonder what my life would be like if I'd been able to finish. But then I think about my mom and how much she needed me, and I know I made the right choice. You can always go back to school. You can't always get more time with the people you love. Richard nodded slowly. That's wise. It's just reality, Maya said. Rich or poor, we all have the same 24 hours in a day. The question is what we do with them. But it's not the same, Richard pointed out gently. I can pay people to do the things I don't want to do, which gives me more time. You can't. True, Maya acknowledged. But I wonder sometimes if that's actually better. When you can pay someone to do everything, do you lose something? The satisfaction of doing it yourself. Richard considered this. I haven't cleaned my own home in 30 years, he said. I haven't cooked a meal in longer than that. I have people who handle everything from my schedule to my dry cleaning. And you're right, there is something lost in that. A connection to the ordinary tasks of living. Why did you really come back here tonight? Maya asked suddenly. You could eat at any restaurant in the city, fancy places with celebrity chefs and wine lists longer than my arm. Richard was quiet for a moment. Honestly, because this feels real. Those fancy restaurants, their performances, the food is technically perfect, but there's no soul to it. Here, your uncle cooks food he cares about. You serve people you know. There's something authentic about that, and I find I'm hungry for authenticity. Before Maya could respond, the bell above the door chimed again, and a group of teenagers came in, loud and laughing. Maya recognized them from the high school down the street. They were good kids, usually polite, though sometimes they forgot their manners when they were in groups. She excused herself to seat them and take their orders. One of the boys, a kid named who'd been coming to the diner since he was in middle school, noticed Richard and whispered something to his friends. They kept glancing over at the booth, clearly curious. When Maya brought their sodas, asked, Is that really Richard? Why don't you ask him yourself? Maya suggested with a smile. Looked uncertain, but his friends egged him on. Finally, he stood up and walked over to Richard's booth, his friends watching from their table. Maya stayed close, ready to intervene if needed, but curious to see how this would play out. Excuse me, mister, said nervously. Sorry to bother you, but I just wanted to say I really admire what you've done. We studied you in our business class. Richard looked up and Maya saw his expression shift from surprise to genuine pleasure. Not a botheration at all. What's your name? Yes, sir. Sit down for a minute, Richard invited, gesturing to the seat across from him. Looked back at his friends, who gave him encouraging thumbs up, then slid into the booth. Maya went to check on her other customers, but she kept an eye on the conversation. She saw Richard talking animatedly, saw leaning forward, hanging on every word. After about 10 minutes, returned to his table looking, and Richard caught Maya's eye and smiled. When Maya brought out Richard's, she asked, What did you tell him? I told him that success isn't about having the best idea, it's about understanding people and solving real problems. I told him that the most valuable skill he could develop was the ability to listen and really hear what people are saying, not just what he wants to hear. Richard cut into his. I also told him that some of the best advice I'd ever gotten came from a waitress in a diner. Maya felt her cheeks warm. You didn't need to say that. Why not? It's true. Richard took a bite of his food. You know, I've been thinking about something since we last talked, about value and worth and how we measure success. I've spent my whole life accumulating wealth, but I'm not sure I've spent enough time thinking about what that wealth is for. What do you mean? Maya asked, intrigued. I mean, what's the point of having billions of dollars if I don't do something meaningful with it? I donate to charities, sure, I have a foundation, but it all feels very distant, removed. I write checks and other people do the work. I never see the impact. Maybe that's the point, Maya suggested. Maybe it's not about you seeing it, maybe it's about it happening. Richard shook his head. No, I think there's more to it than that. I think I've been using my wealth as a buffer between myself and the world. It's easier to write a check than to actually engage with problems. Easier to pay someone to fix something than to get my hands dirty doing it myself. So what are you going to do about it? Maya asked. I don't know yet, Richard admitted. But I'm thinking about it. Your perspective has been valuable to me, Maya. You see things I don't see. You understand things I've forgotten or never knew in the first place. Over the next hour, as the diner slowly emptied and closing time approached, Maya and Richard talked about everything from education to healthcare to the growing divide between rich and poor in the country. Richard asked questions about her life, about the challenges she faced, about how she made decisions with limited resources. Maya found herself opening up more than she had intended, talking about her fears for her mother's health, her worries about the future, her secret dream of one day going back to school to study business. Why business? Richard asked. Because I want to understand how things work, Maya explained. I want to understand why some people have so much and others have so little. I want to learn how to build something that creates real value, not just profit. I see how hard my uncle works, how much he cares about this diner, and I think about how precarious it all is. One bad month and he could lose everything. That doesn't seem right to me. It's not right, Richard agreed. The system is designed in a way that makes it very easy for those who already have wealth to accumulate more, and very difficult for those without it to build any. I benefit from that system, which makes me complicit in its unfairness. So change it, Maya said simply. Richard laughed, but it wasn't a dismissive laugh. Just like that. Why not? You have the money, you have the influence. If you can't change things, who can? It's not that simple, Richard began, then stopped himself. Actually, maybe it is that simple. Maybe I've been making it complicated because complicated feels more sophisticated. But maybe the simple answer is the right one. Use what I have to create real change. Danny emerged from the kitchen, turning off the grill. We're closing up soon, folks, he announced to the few remaining customers. Richard looked at his watch, surprised. I didn't realize how late it had gotten. I should let you close. It's okay, Maya said, though she knew she still had an hour of closing duties ahead of her. I'm glad you came back. Richard pulled out his wallet, but Maya stopped him. Wait, let me get your check first. She went to print it out, and when she returned, Richard was standing by the booth, looking at something on his phone. He took the check and glanced at it, then handed her his credit card. When she ran it and brought back the receipt, he'd written in another substantial tip, though not as large as the first one. $200 this time. Mr. Maya began. Richard, he corrected. And before you protest, that's not payment for your time or your insights. It's a thank you for your honesty and for making me think about things I'd stopped questioning. Also, I noticed your shoes are new. I'm glad the last tip was useful. Maya looked down at her feet, then back at Richard. How did you know they were new? Because the old ones were falling apart, Richard said simply. I notice more than you might think. As Richard prepared to leave, he turned back to Maya. I'd like to continue these conversations if you're willing, not just randomly when I happen to stop by, but regularly. What if I came by every Tuesday evening? Would that work for you? Maya considered this. Part of her thought it was strange, a billionaire wanting to have weekly conversations with a waitress. But another part of her, the part that had enjoyed their discussions tonight, that had felt intellectually stimulated in a way she hadn't felt since leaving college, wanted to say yes. Sure, she said. Tuesdays are usually slower anyway. Excellent, Richard said, and his smile was warm and genuine. I'll see you next week then. After he left, Danny came out from the back where he'd clearly been listening. "That man is sweet on you," he said with a knowing look. "Uncle Danny, no," Maya protested. "It's not like that, he values my perspective on business stuff." Danny raised an eyebrow. "A man doesn't come to a diner every week and tip $200 just for business perspective, sweetheart." "Well, what else would it be?" Maya asked, genuinely confused. "We're from completely different worlds. He probably has a wife or a girlfriend, someone glamorous and sophisticated. I'm just interesting to him because I'm different from the people he usually talks to." "Maybe," Danny allowed, "or maybe he sees something in you that you don't see in yourself yet." He handed her a broom. "Now come on, let's get this place closed up. You've got a big day tomorrow, apparently being a billionaire's advisor." Maya swept the floors, her mind full of the evening's conversation. She thought about what Richard had said about using his wealth for real change, about getting his hands dirty instead of just writing checks. She thought about the high school student and how Richard had taken time to talk to him, to encourage him. She thought about the way Richard had listened to her, really listened, like her words mattered. When she got home that night, her mother was awake, sitting up in bed reading. "You're late," her mother said, but she was smiling. "Good tips tonight." "You could say that," Maya replied, showing her mother the receipt. Her mother's eyes widened. "Maya, who is this man?" So Maya told her the whole story, from the first night to tonight's conversation. Her mother listened intently, asking questions, and when Maya finished, her mother was quiet for a long moment. "This man sees something special in you," her mother finally said. "I've always known you were special, but it's nice when the rest of the world starts to notice." "Mama, he's just a lonely rich man looking for authentic conversation," Maya protested. "Maybe," her mother said, "but lonely rich men have their pick of authentic conversations. He chose you for a reason. You're smart, Maya, you always have been. Smarter than you give yourself credit for. And this Richard, he's smart enough to recognize that." That night, Maya lay in bed thinking about value and worth, about the difference between price and true cost. She thought about Richard's world of billions and her world of careful budgets, and she wondered if there was a way to bridge those worlds. She thought about the dreams she'd put aside and wondered if maybe, just maybe, it wasn't too late to pick them back up. Across the city, Richard was having similar thoughts, though from a different angle. He was thinking about the moment when had approached him, how the boy's eyes had lit up with possibility and hope. He was thinking about Maya's simple challenge, "So change it." He was thinking about all the years he'd spent building wealth and wondering if it was time to start building something else. Something that mattered in a way that stock portfolios and real estate holdings never could. He opened his laptop and started writing, making notes about ideas that had been forming in his mind during his conversation with Maya. Ideas about education, about opportunity, about creating pathways for people like her to achieve the things they'd dreamed of. He worked late into the night, energized in a way he hadn't felt in years, because for the first time in a long time, he felt like he was working on something that actually mattered. The following Tuesday, Richard returned to the diner as promised, and the Tuesday after that, and the one after that. It became a routine, something both of them looked forward to. Their conversations ranged from business to philosophy to personal stories. Maya talked about her childhood, her father who had died when she was 12, her determination to make something of herself despite the obstacles. Richard talked about his own childhood, growing up poor in a small town, the hunger that had driven him to succeed, and the loneliness that had come with that success. They talked about two who had started coming to the diner more often, sometimes doing his homework in a corner booth. Richard would occasionally join him, helping with math problems or discussing business concepts. It was informal mentoring, unplanned and organic, but it was making a difference. Maya could see it in the way he carried himself, the confidence growing in him. "You're good with him," Maya observed one evening after had left. "He reminds me of myself at that age," Richard said. "Ambitious, eager, but not quite sure how to channel it. If someone had taken an interest in me back then, maybe I would have made fewer mistakes along the way." "What mistakes did you make?" Maya asked. Richard was quiet for a moment. "I let success become more important than people. I built an empire, but I didn't build a life. I have business associates, but very few real friends. I've been married twice, both times to women who loved the idea of Richard the billionaire but didn't much care for Richard the person. I have a daughter I barely know because I was always too busy making my next deal." He looked at Maya. "Money can buy a lot of things, but it can't buy back time. It can't buy back the moments you missed while you were busy accumulating it." Maya reached across the table and squeezed his hand, a gesture of comfort that felt natural in the moment. "It's not too late," she said. "You still have time." Richard looked at their hands, then at her face, and something passed between them, something neither of them was quite ready to name or acknowledge. He cleared his throat and gently pulled his hand back, not because he wanted to, but because it seemed like the right thing to do. Maya leaned forward, curious. "What decision?" Richard pulled out his tablet and brought up a document. "I'm starting a foundation. A real one, not just a tax shelter where I throw money at problems and hope they go away. I want to create something that actually changes lives, that creates opportunities for people who wouldn't otherwise have them." He showed her the plans, and Maya's eyes widened as she read. The foundation would focus on education, specifically on helping young people from low-income backgrounds access college and vocational training. But it wasn't just about scholarships. Richard's plan included mentoring programs, job placement assistance, and ongoing support throughout their education and into their careers. "This is incredible," Maya said, scrolling through the details. "But why are you showing me this?" "Because I want you to help me build it," Richard said simply. Maya looked up sharply. "What?" "I need someone who understands the challenges these young people face. Someone who's lived it, who knows what they need and what they don't. Someone who can cut through the nonsense and focus on what actually matters." Richard's gaze was intense, sincere. "I need someone like you, Maya. I need you. But I don't have any experience with foundations or nonprofits or—" "You have something more valuable than experience," Richard interrupted. "You have wisdom and insight and the ability to see what's real. The rest can be learned. I can hire people with nonprofit experience. What I can't hire is your perspective, your understanding of what people actually need." Maya felt overwhelmed. This was beyond anything she'd imagined. "I have a job. I have my mother to take care of. I can't just—" "You could do this part-time to start," Richard suggested. "Work with me a few days a week, keep your shifts at the diner if you want. We could structure it however works for you. And Maya, the salary would be enough that you could afford better care for your mother. You could afford to go back to school if you wanted." It was tempting, so tempting that Maya felt herself leaning toward yes before she even thought it through. But something held her back. "Why me, really? There are hundreds of people with better qualifications." "Because qualifications aren't everything," Richard said. "In fact, sometimes they get in the way. People with too many credentials often overthink things. They lose sight of simple truths in favor of complex theories. You don't do that. You see clearly and you speak honestly. That's exactly what this foundation needs." "Can I think about it?" Maya asked. "Of course," Richard said. "Take all the time you need, but Maya, I hope you'll say yes. This project matters to me more than any business deal I've ever made, and I don't think I can do it right without you." Over the next week, Maya thought about little else. She talked to her mother, who was enthusiastic about the idea. She talked to Danny, who was more cautious but ultimately supportive. She even talked to the high school student, asking him what kind of help would actually make a difference for someone in his position. "The thing is," told her, sitting in his usual booth with his textbooks spread out, "there are scholarships out there. Financial aid exists. But nobody tells you how to navigate the system. Nobody explains what you need to do or when you need to do it. And even if you figure that out, you're on your own once you get to college. No support system, no safety net. One bad semester and you're done because you can't afford to fail, not even once." Maya wrote down his thoughts, recognizing the truth in them. This was exactly what Richard was talking about. It wasn't just about money. It was about comprehensive support, about giving people what they actually needed to succeed. The following Tuesday, when Richard arrived at the diner, Maya had made her decision. She waited until his meal was served, and she'd checked on her other customers. Then she slid into the booth across from him. "I'll do it," she said. "I'll help you with the foundation." Richard's face lit up with genuine joy. "You will." "On one condition," Maya added. "I want to start part-time like you suggested. I'm not ready to leave the diner completely. This place, these people, they're my foundation. I can't lose that." "Understood," Richard agreed. "We'll work around your schedule at the diner, whatever you need." They spent the rest of the evening discussing the details. Richard wanted to move quickly, to get the foundation up and running within 6 months. He had office space available in one of his buildings downtown, and he'd already been interviewing candidates for various positions. What he needed from Maya was guidance on program design, on making sure they were actually addressing real needs, and not just implementing programs that sounded good on paper. I also want you to be involved in selecting the board members, Richard said. Too often, foundation boards are full of wealthy donors who mean well but don't really understand the issues. I want a mix of perspectives, including people who lived through the challenges we're trying to address. You'll get pushback on that, Maya pointed out. Rich donors like to feel important. They're not going to want to share board seats with regular people. Then they don't have to donate, Richard said firmly. This is my foundation, funded with my money. I don't need their donations. What I need is their genuine commitment to the mission. If they can't accept a diverse board, they're not the right fit anyway. Maya found herself smiling. This was the Richard she'd come to know over their Tuesday evening conversations, the one who spoke about purpose and meaning rather than profit and loss. He was different from the man who'd first walked into the diner 2 months ago. Or maybe he wasn't different. Maybe he'd just remembered who he used to be before wealth had surrounded him with yes men and insulated him from reality. Over the next several weeks, Maya began working with Richard on the foundation, meeting at his office on her days off from the diner. The office was everything she'd expected and nothing she was prepared for. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city, expensive furniture, artwork that probably cost more than she made in a decade. But Richard had set up a small conference room for their work sessions, and he kept it simple and functional, as if he knew the opulence would make her uncomfortable. They interviewed potential program directors, reviewed proposals from consultants, and worked on defining the foundation's mission and values. Maya insisted that everything they did should be tested against a simple question. Would this actually help someone like her? Someone working hard, trying to better themselves, but facing obstacles that seemed insurmountable. Here's the thing about being poor, Maya explained during one of their planning sessions. It's expensive. When you can't afford to buy quality things, you end up buying cheap things that break and need replacing. When you can't afford a car, you take public transportation, which takes longer and limits where you can work. When you can't afford, you have to turn down jobs with inconvenient hours. The system is designed in a way that makes it hard to get ahead. Richard listened and took notes, asking questions, pushing her to elaborate on points that seemed particularly important. He was learning, Maya realized, not just about poverty, but about how to think differently about problems and solutions. And she was learning, too, about how foundations worked, about nonprofit management, about all the complex machinery that went into turning good intentions into actual results. One afternoon, about 3 months into the project, Richard's assistant brought in lunch for them. As they ate, Richard seemed distracted, looking at his phone more than usual. "Is everything okay?" Maya asked. Richard set down his phone. "My daughter is getting married. The wedding is in 2 months." "That's wonderful," Maya said. "Congratulations." "Thank you." Richard didn't look as happy as she would have expected. "We're not close. She's marrying a man I've never met. I'll probably find out about the wedding details through a formal invitation like any other guest." "That must be hard," Maya said softly. "It's my own fault," Richard admitted. "I was never there for her growing up, always working, always traveling, always too busy. Her mother raised her, and when they divorced, my daughter chose to stay with her mother. I can't blame her for that. I wasn't much of a father." "It's not too late," Maya said. "To build a relationship with her, I mean, she's still your daughter." "She doesn't need anything from me," Richard said. "She's successful in her own right, happy by all accounts. What could I offer her at this point?" "Your presence," Maya said simply. "Your genuine interest in her life, not your money or your connections, just you. Maybe that's all she ever wanted in the first place." Richard was quiet for a long moment. "How did you get so wise?" "I'm not wise," Maya protested. "I just know that at the end of the day, the only things that really matter are the relationships we have with the people we love. Everything else is just noise." That evening, Richard didn't come to the diner as usual. Maya found herself disappointed, though she tried not to examine why too closely. She served her customers, chatted with the regulars, helped Danny with the evening rush. But part of her mind was elsewhere, wondering where Richard was, hoping he was okay. Her phone buzzed around 9 o'clock. A text from Richard. "Sorry I missed dinner. I called my daughter. We talked for 2 hours. Thank you for pushing me to reach out. This conversation meant more to me than you know." Maya smiled and texted back. "I'm glad. See you at the office tomorrow." "Wouldn't miss it." The foundation work continued to progress. They hired a talented executive director, a woman named who had spent 20 years working with youth. They assembled a diverse board that included a teacher, a social worker, a former scholarship recipient who was now a successful engineer, and yes, a few wealthy donors who genuinely believed in the mission. They developed comprehensive programs that addressed not just education costs, but also the hidden obstacles that prevented young people from succeeding. Throughout this process, Maya's relationship with Richard deepened. They were partners in a meaningful project, but they were also becoming genuine friends. Richard opened up about his life, his regrets, his hopes for the future. Maya shared her own dreams, which had started to expand beyond just survival to possibilities she'd never dared to imagine before. "I've been thinking about going back to school," she told him one day, "getting my degree in business like I always wanted." "You should," Richard encouraged. "You have a natural aptitude for it, and the foundation could benefit from having you fully versed in nonprofit management and organizational development." "I don't know if I can handle working and going to school," Maya said. "I tried that before and it didn't work out." "You were alone before," Richard pointed out. "Now you have support. The foundation can help with tuition. We can adjust your work schedule around your classes, and you have people who believe in you and want to see you succeed." Maya felt tears prick her eyes. "Why are you doing all this for me?" Richard met her gaze steadily. "Because you deserve it, because you've given me more than you know. You've helped me remember what matters, helped me build something meaningful. Helping you is the least I can do. Besides," he added with a slight smile, "it's a sound investment. You're going to do great things, Maya. I want to be part of making that possible." 6 months after that first conversation in the diner, the Foundation for Educational Opportunity officially launched. The press conference was held at the Foundation's office, and Richard insisted that Maya stand beside him as he made the announcement. She wore a simple blue dress that she'd bought specifically for the occasion, feeling out of place among the reporters and photographers and important-looking people who'd come to hear Richard speak. "This foundation represents a new direction for me," Richard told the assembled crowd. "For years, I've been focused on building wealth, but wealth without purpose is meaningless. This foundation is about creating opportunities for young people who have the talent and drive to succeed but lack the resources and support. We're not just offering scholarships. We're offering comprehensive support, mentoring, job placement assistance, and ongoing guidance. We're investing in people, in potential in the future." He turned to Maya. "I couldn't have built this foundation without the wisdom and insight of Maya, who serves as our director of programs. Maya has lived the challenges our beneficiaries face. She understands what they need, and she's designed our programs to address those needs in practical, meaningful ways. This foundation works because of her vision and dedication." The cameras flashed, and Maya felt exposed and proud and terrified all at once. After the press conference, several reporters wanted to interview her, asking about her background, about her role in the foundation, about her relationship with Richard. She handled the questions as best she could, honest and straightforward, the same way she handled everything else in her life. That evening, she returned to the diner for her regular shift, still wearing her blue dress because she hadn't had time to change. The regulars applauded when she walked in, having seen the press conference on the news. Danny hugged her tight, tears in his eyes. "I'm so proud of you, sweetheart," he said. "Your father would be too." Was there, sitting in his usual booth, and he gave her a high five when she passed. "You're famous now," he said, grinning. "I'm still the same person," Maya insisted. "I'm still a waitress at Danny's diner." "You're so much more than that," a familiar voice said, and Maya turned to see Richard had come in. He'd loosened his tie and rolled up his sleeves, looking more relaxed than he had at the press conference. "But I'm glad you're still here. I was hoping to get some of that." Maya laughed, feeling the tension of the day drain away, coming right up. As she brought Richard his coffee and took his order, everything felt right. She was building something new without abandoning what she already had. She was growing and changing while staying true to herself. And she had found, in this unexpected friendship with a billionaire, something rare and valuable, a genuine connection based on mutual respect and shared purpose. "You know," Richard said as she set down his coffee, "I came into this diner 6 months ago looking for perspective on an investment. I found something much more valuable." "What's that?" Maya asked. "Purpose," Richard said simply, "and a friend. Thank you, Maya, for everything." "Thank you," Maya replied, "for seeing something in me I didn't know was there." The weeks that followed the foundation's launch were busy and exciting. Applications poured in from young people across the region, each one telling a story of ambition held back by circumstance. Maya read every application personally, seeing pieces of herself in so many of them. She worked with and the rest of the team to select the first cohort of beneficiaries, 20 students who would receive full support through college or vocational training. Richard attended the selection meetings, but he deferred to Maya's judgment on most decisions. "You know what to look for," he told her. "You know who has the drive and determination to make the most of this opportunity." Among the selected students was, which surprised no one. His application was strong, his grades excellent, and his essay about wanting to create businesses that served his community was exactly the kind of purpose-driven thinking the foundation wanted to support. When Maya called to tell him he'd been selected, she could hear the emotion in his voice. "Thank you, Ms.," he said, his voice thick. "This changes everything for me, everything." "You did this," Maya told him. "You earned this. We're just giving you the tools. What you build with them is up to you." As the foundation work ramped up, Maya found herself spending more time at the office and less at the diner. She'd reduced her shifts to 3 evenings a week, and she'd started taking online classes till her mother's health had stabilized with better medical care that Maya could now afford. They'd moved to a nicer apartment, nothing fancy but clean and safe with enough space for both of them to have their own rooms. Maya had offered to buy her mother a house, but her mother had refused. "I don't need a house," her mother had said. "I need to know that my daughter isn't losing herself in all these changes. Stay grounded, baby. Remember where you come from." Maya took that advice to heart. She still worked at the diner, still chatted with the regulars, still helped Danny close up on the nights she was there. But she also studied, worked at the foundation, and spent time with Richard planning the organization's future. It was a balancing act, exhausting at times but deeply fulfilling. One evening, about 8 months after the foundation's launch, Richard came to the diner looking troubled. Maya could tell immediately that something was wrong. His usual calm demeanor was ruffled, his movements tense. "What's going on?" she asked, sliding into the booth across from him. "My daughter's wedding is this weekend," Richard said. "We've been talking regularly since I reached out to her, and things have been getting better between us. But I just got off the phone with her and she's stressed about the wedding. Her family is causing problems, there are issues with the venue, and she sounded overwhelmed." "What kind of problems?" Maya asked. "Typical wedding drama, from what I can tell. His parents want more control over the planning, there's disagreement about the guest list, that sort of thing." Richard ran his hand through his hair, a gesture Maya had learned meant he was anxious. "I don't know how to help. I've never been good at this kind of thing. I offered to pay for whatever she needed, but she got upset, said that's not what she wanted from me." "What does she want?" Maya asked gently. "I don't know," Richard admitted. "That's the problem. I don't know how to be a father. I know how to write checks and make deals, but I don't know how to just be there for someone." Maya thought about this, about her own father and how present he'd been in her life before he died. How he'd always known the right thing to say, the right way to help. "Maybe that's exactly what she needs," Maya suggested. "Just you being there, not fixing everything, not throwing money at the problems, just being present and supportive." "I wouldn't know where to start," Richard said. An idea formed in Maya's mind. "What if I came with you? To the wedding, I mean. As a friend, someone who could maybe help you navigate the emotional side of things. I'm good at reading people and situations. Maybe I could give you guidance, help you figure out what your daughter needs." Richard looked surprised, then grateful. "Would you really do that?" "Of course," Maya said. "That's what friends do, they show up for each other." The wedding was being held at a resort a few hours outside the city, in wine country. Richard sent a car for Maya on Friday afternoon, and she felt ridiculously out of place climbing into the luxury vehicle in her best dress, which was nice enough for the diner but probably wouldn't cut it at a fancy wedding. When she mentioned this to Richard in a text, he responded immediately. "There's a boutique near the resort. We'll stop there first. My treat. Consider it payment for your services as emotional advisor." Maya wanted to protest, but she knew he was right. She needed appropriate clothes for this event, and she couldn't afford the kind of outfit that would fit in at a high-society wedding. She texted back, "Fine, but nothing too extravagant. I still need to recognize myself in the mirror." The boutique was elegant and intimidating, but the saleswoman was kind and helpful. Within an hour, Maya had selected a beautiful navy dress for the wedding and a casual outfit for the rehearsal dinner. Richard had somehow called ahead and arranged for everything to be charged to his account, and no amount of protesting from Maya could change this. When she met Richard at the resort that evening, he looked at her in the navy dress and smiled. "You look lovely," he said, and there was something in his voice that made Maya's heart skip slightly. "Thank you," she said, feeling suddenly shy. "You clean up pretty well yourself." Richard was wearing a suit, nothing ostentatious but clearly expensive and well-tailored. He offered his arm, and together they walked into the resort's restaurant for the rehearsal dinner. Maya could feel eyes on them as they entered, people curious about who she was and what her relationship to Richard might be. Richard's daughter, Christina, was a beautiful woman in her early 30s with her father's blue eyes and a warm smile. She looked genuinely happy to see Richard, and when he introduced Maya, Christina's smile widened. "So you're the famous Maya," Christina said, shaking her hand. "Dad talks about you constantly. The foundation, the work you're doing together, it's really wonderful." "Thank you," Maya said, "and congratulations on your wedding. Your father is very happy for you." "I know he is," Christina said, glancing at Richard with affection. "We've been getting to know each other again these past few months, and it's been really special. I have you to thank for that, apparently. Dad said you encouraged him to reach out." Maya felt embarrassed by the praise. "I just reminded him what was important. He did the hard work of rebuilding the relationship." The rehearsal dinner was surprisingly intimate, just close family and friends. Maya felt a bit awkward at first, but Christina made a point of including her in conversations, introducing her to people, making her feel welcome. Richard's ex-wife was there, an elegant woman named who was gracious and kind to Maya, showing no signs of jealousy or resentment. During dinner, Maya watched Richard interact with his daughter and saw a side of him she hadn't seen before. He was attentive, asking about her work, her plans for the future. He listened more than he talked, and when he did speak, it was to offer support and encouragement rather than advice or solutions. He was learning, Maya realized, how to be present without trying to control or fix everything. At one point, Christina excused herself to handle some last-minute wedding details, and her mother cornered her near the bar. Maya could see the conversation becoming heated, could see Christina's stress levels rising. Without thinking, she excused herself from her table and walked over. "Excuse me," Maya said pleasantly. "Christina, I think your father needs you for a moment. Something about photos." Christina grabbed onto the excuse gratefully. "Oh, of course. Excuse me, Mrs." As they walked away, Christina whispered, "Thank you. She's been driving me crazy all week about the seating chart." "I figured you needed rescuing," Maya said with a smile. "Your father taught me that sometimes the best help is just removing someone from a difficult situation." "He's different now," Christina observed. "Happier, I think, more present. Is that because of the foundation work?" "Maybe partly," Maya said, "but I think it's more about him reconnecting with what matters to him, including you." Christina's eyes were bright with emotion. "I'm glad he has you in his life, Maya. He needs someone who sees him as a person, not just as Richard the billionaire. That's rare in his world." The wedding the next day was beautiful, held in a garden overlooking vineyard-covered hills. Maya sat with Richard in the third row, watching as Christina married a man who clearly adored her. When the officiant asked who gave the bride away, Richard stood and said clearly, "I do," and Maya saw tears in his eyes. After the ceremony, during the reception, Maya found herself dancing with Richard. She'd protested that she couldn't dance, but he'd insisted, and now they were swaying gently to a slow song, surrounded by other couples. "Thank you for being here," Richard said quietly. "This weekend would have been much harder without you." "You're doing great," Maya assured him. "Christina is so happy, and you can see how much it means to her that you're here." "I almost missed this," Richard said. "If you hadn't pushed me to reach out to her, I would have missed my own daughter's wedding. I would have missed the chance to rebuild our relationship. I owe you so much, Maya." "You don't owe me anything," Maya said. "We're friends, we help each other, that's how it works." Richard looked at her, and something in his expression made Maya's breath catch. For a moment, she thought he was going to say something important, something that would change the nature of their relationship. But then the song ended, and the moment passed. They separated, and someone else asked Richard to dance, and Maya found herself standing alone, wondering what had just almost happened. Later that night, after the reception had ended and the guests had dispersed to their rooms, Maya found herself unable to sleep. She put on a sweater over her pajamas and went for a walk around the resort grounds. The moon was full, casting silver light over the vineyards, and the air was cool and pleasant. She found Richard sitting on a bench overlooking the valley, still in his wedding attire minus the jacket and tie. He looked up when she approached and smiled. "Couldn't sleep either?" he asked. "Too much going on in my head," Maya admitted, sitting beside him. "It's been an emotional weekend." "It has," Richard agreed. "But a good emotional. Christina seems genuinely happy, and I feel like I'm finally building a real relationship with her. I have you to thank for that." "You keep thanking me," Maya said. "But you're the one who did the work. You're the one who made the effort to change and grow." Richard was quiet for a moment, looking out at the moonlit valley. "Can I ask you something, Maya?" "Of course." "What do you think about us?" he asked, and there was something vulnerable in his voice. "About our friendship, I mean." Maya's heart started beating faster. "I think it's one of the most important relationships in my life," she said honestly. "You've changed my life in so many ways, given me opportunities I never dreamed possible. But more than that, you've become someone I genuinely care about, someone I respect and admire." "I care about you too," Richard said. "More than I probably should if I'm being honest." Maya turned to look at him. "What does that mean?" Richard met her gaze. "It means that somewhere along the way, this stopped being just a friendship for me. It means I look forward to Tuesday evenings more than anything else in my week. It means when I make decisions, I find myself wondering what you would think, what you would say. It means—" He paused, seeming to struggle for words. "It means I've developed feelings for you that go beyond friendship." Maya's mind was racing. Part of her had known this was coming, had felt the same pull, the same growing attachment. But hearing him say it out loud made it real and complicated and slightly terrifying. "Richard," she began, "we're from completely different worlds. You're a billionaire and I'm a waitress. People would say you're taking advantage of me or I'm taking advantage of you. They'd never believe this was real." "Do you care what people think?" Richard asked. "Yes," Maya said honestly. "I care because I don't want people to dismiss me as some kind of gold digger. I've worked hard to build my reputation, my sense of self. I don't want to lose that." "You wouldn't lose anything," Richard said. "If anything, you've given me more than I could ever give you. You've helped me remember who I am, what matters. You've helped me build something meaningful. You've helped me reconnect with my daughter. Those things are priceless." "I don't know," Maya said, feeling overwhelmed. "This is all happening so fast. 6 months ago, I was just a waitress trying to make ends meet. Now I'm working at a foundation, going back to school, and apparently the subject of a billionaire's affection. It's too much change too quickly." Richard reached out and took her hand gently. "Then we'll slow down. We don't have to figure everything out tonight. We can take our time, see how things develop naturally. All I'm asking is that you don't dismiss the possibility of something more between us just because of the circumstances of how we met or the differences in our bank accounts." Maya looked at their joined hands, at the way his thumb was tracing small circles on her palm. She thought about all the Tuesdays they'd spent together, all the conversations, all the ways they'd supported and challenged and inspired each other. She thought about how she felt when he walked into the diner, how her whole evening got brighter just knowing he was there. "I have feelings for you too," she admitted quietly. "I've been trying to ignore them, telling myself it was just gratitude or admiration, but it's more than that. When I'm with you, I feel seen and valued in a way I've never experienced before. You make me want to be better, to reach higher, to believe I can achieve things I never thought possible." "So what do we do?" Richard asked. "We take it slow," Maya said. "We keep building the foundation, keep working together on something meaningful. We keep having our Tuesday dinners, and we see where this goes naturally without forcing it or rushing it. Can you do that?" "I can do anything if it means you'll give us a chance," Richard said. They sat together on the bench, holding hands, watching the moonlight on the vineyards, not needing to say anything more. Something had shifted between them, an acknowledgement of feelings that had been growing for months. Neither of them knew exactly where this would lead, but they were both willing to find out. The next morning, before leaving the resort, Christina pulled Maya aside for a private conversation. They walked through the gardens, and Christina was direct in a way that reminded Maya of Richard. "My father cares about you," Christina said. "I can see it in the way he looks at you, talks about you. I just want you to know that I'm happy about it. He deserves to have someone genuine in his life, someone who sees him for who he is rather than what he has." "I'm not trying to," Maya began, but Christina cut her off. I know you're not trying to do anything except be honest and authentic, which is exactly why you're good for him. Just promise me something." "What?" "Promise me you won't let the money and the lifestyle change who you are. You have something special, Maya, a clarity and groundedness that's rare. My father needs that. Don't lose it trying to fit into his world." "I won't," Maya promised. "I can't afford to, literally and figuratively. Who I am is all I have." Christina smiled and hugged her. "Then you have everything you need." On the drive back to the city, Maya and Richard talked about the weekend, about Christina's happiness, about the Foundation's upcoming programs. They didn't talk about their late-night conversation, but it hung in the air between them, a promise and a possibility. When Richard dropped Maya off at her apartment, he walked her to the door like a gentleman from another era. "Tuesday?" he asked. "Tuesday," Maya confirmed. "Same booth." "Wouldn't have it any other way," Richard said, and the smile he gave her was warm and full of promise. Maya went inside, her mind full of the weekend's events. She told her mother about the wedding, about Christina, about the beautiful resort. Her mother listened with a knowing smile. "And Richard?" her mother asked. "What about him?" "Maya, I raised you better than to lie to your mother. What's going on between you two?" Maya sighed and sat down at the kitchen table. "I don't know, Mama. We're taking things slow, seeing where it goes. I'm scared, though. Scared of what people will think, scared of getting hurt, scared of this all being too good to be true." Her mother reached across the table and took her hand. "Fear is natural, baby, but don't let it stop you from living. This man, he seems good to you. He values you for who you are. That's rare and precious. Don't throw it away because you're afraid." "But what if it doesn't work out? What if we try this and it ruins everything we've built with the foundation? What if you don't try and you spend the rest of your life wondering what might have been?" her mother countered. "You've spent your whole life being careful, being responsible, putting others first. Maybe it's time to take a chance on something just for you." Maya thought about this, about risk and reward, about the difference between being careful and being afraid. She thought about Richard's hand in hers under the moonlight, about the way he looked at her like she was the most important person in the room. She thought about all the ways her life had changed in the past 8 months, all the ways she'd grown and expanded beyond the limits she'd once thought defined her. The following months brought changes both subtle and profound to Maya's life. She and Richard continued their Tuesday dinners at the diner, but now there was an undercurrent of romance to their conversations. Small touches became more frequent, lingering looks carried more meaning. They went on proper dates too, though Richard was careful to choose places where they could talk and be themselves rather than fancy restaurants where they'd be on display. The foundation continued to grow and flourish. The first cohort of students was thriving and had become something of an unofficial ambassador for the program, speaking to new applicants about his experience. Maya had completed several courses toward her business degree and was finding that her practical experience with the foundation complemented her academic studies in surprising ways. But not everything was easy. As word spread about Maya's relationship with Richard, there were whispers and speculation. Some people at the foundation questioned her qualifications, suggesting she'd only gotten her position because of personal connections. Online commenters called her a gold digger, said she was using Richard for his money. The local newspaper ran a profile that focused more on the romance angle than on the foundation's work. Maya tried to ignore the criticism, but it stung. She'd worked hard to build her credibility, and now it felt like people were dismissing all of that because of who she was dating. She found herself second-guessing her decisions at the foundation, wondering if people would respect her choices, or if they'd assume Richard was pulling the strings behind the scenes. One particularly difficult day, after a board meeting where one of the members had openly questioned her recommendation on a program expansion, Maya came to the diner feeling defeated. She was supposed to work the evening shift, and she welcomed the familiar routine, the simple task of serving food and making small talk. It was grounding in a way that nothing else in her life was anymore. Richard came in for his Tuesday dinner and immediately sensed something was wrong. When she brought him his coffee, he caught her hand gently. "Talk to me," he said. "What happened?" Maya glanced around, aware of the other customers. "Not here, after my shift." "I'll wait," Richard said simply, and he did. He sat in his booth for 3 hours, ordering coffee and pie, chatting with Danny and the regulars until Maya's shift ended and they could sit down together in the empty diner. "Tell me," Richard said, and Maya poured out everything. The doubts, the criticism, the feeling that she was losing herself in this new life. The fear that people would never see her as anything more than Richard's girlfriend, that all her hard work and capability would be overshadowed by their relationship. Richard listened without interrupting, and when she finished, he was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "I'm sorry. I didn't realize how much pressure this was putting on you. I should have been more aware." "It's not your fault," Maya said. "You haven't done anything wrong. This is just the reality of our situation. You're famous, you're powerful, and people are going to make assumptions." "So what do you want to do?" Richard asked. "Because if this relationship is making your life harder, if it's undermining your work at the foundation, then we need to figure out how to fix that." Maya looked at him, at the genuine concern in his eyes, at the way he was putting her needs ahead of his own feelings. This was why she cared about him, she realized. Not because of his money or his success, but because of moments like this, when he showed her that he valued her happiness above everything else. "I don't want to end this," Maya said, "but I need to establish my own credibility separate from you. I need people to see me for who I am and what I've accomplished, not just as your girlfriend." "How can we make that happen?" Richard asked. Maya had been thinking about this. "I want to do something independently. A project that's mine, that I can build and execute without your involvement. Something that will show people I have value on my own." "What kind of project?" "I don't know yet," Maya admitted, "but I'll figure it out." Over the next few weeks, Maya worked on developing her idea. She started by talking to the foundation's beneficiaries, asking them what challenges they were facing that the foundation's existing programs didn't address. She talked to and the other students, and a pattern began to emerge. Many of them were struggling not just with their studies, but with the social and cultural divide between their backgrounds and the college environment. They felt out of place, uncertain how to navigate the unspoken rules of academic and professional settings. Maya knew that feeling intimately. She'd felt it when she first started working with Richard at the foundation, surrounded by people with advanced degrees and years of experience. She'd had to learn on the fly how to carry herself in those settings, how to speak up in meetings, how to project confidence even when she felt uncertain. She developed a proposal for a new program, a series of workshops and mentoring sessions focused on building professional skills and confidence. It would cover everything from how to dress for different professional settings, to how to network effectively, to how to negotiate for better wages and opportunities. The curriculum would be developed and taught by people who had successfully bridged that divide themselves, including Maya. She presented the proposal to the foundation's board, deliberately keeping Richard in the dark about it until the meeting. She wanted this to be entirely her own work, evaluated on its merits rather than approved because of her relationship with the founder. The presentation was one of the hardest things Maya had ever done. She stood in front of the board, including the member who had questioned her before, and laid out her vision. She had data on the need, testimonials from students, and a detailed budget and implementation plan. She spoke clearly and confidently, drawing on everything she'd learned in her business classes and her time at the foundation. When she finished, there was a moment of silence. Then the executive director started asking questions. They were tough questions, probing the details of the program, challenging Maya's assumptions, testing her understanding. But Maya had done her homework, and she answered each question thoroughly and thoughtfully. Richard said nothing during the presentation, just listened intently. When it came time to vote, he abstained, saying, "This is Maya's proposal, and it should be evaluated on its own merits without any influence from me. But I will say that I'm impressed by the thoroughness of the work and the clear need it addresses." The board approved the program unanimously. After the meeting, several board members approached Maya to congratulate her, including the one who had questioned her before. "I owe you an apology," he said. "I made assumptions about your capabilities based on your relationship with Richard. This proposal proves I was wrong. This is excellent work." "Thank you," Maya said, feeling a weight lift from her shoulders. "I appreciate that." That evening, Richard took her to a quiet restaurant to celebrate. Over dinner, he raised his glass in a toast. "To Maya, who just proved to everyone what I've known all along, that she's brilliant, capable, and doesn't need anyone's approval or assistance to do remarkable things." "I couldn't have done it without everything you taught me," Maya said. "I didn't teach you anything," Richard said. "I just gave you opportunities to show what you were already capable of. There's a difference." As they ate, Maya felt more at peace than she had in weeks. She'd proven to herself and others that she had value independent of her relationship with Richard. She'd created something meaningful that would help the people she cared about, and she'd done it in a way that maintained her integrity and authenticity. "I've been thinking," Richard said as they finished dessert, about the future. I know we said we'd take things slow, and I respect that, but I want you to know that this isn't casual for me. You're not just someone I'm dating. You're my partner in the foundation and in life. I'm in this for the long term if you are." Maya reached across the table and took his hand. "I'm in this," she said. "I'm still figuring out how to balance everything, how to be with you while still being myself, but I want to figure it out. You're important to me, Richard, more important than I ever expected anyone to be." "Then we'll figure it out together," Richard said. "Whatever challenges come up, we'll face them as partners." The program Maya had designed, called Bridge to Success, launched 3 months later. She personally taught several of the workshops, sharing her own experiences of navigating different social and professional environments. The students responded enthusiastically, and the program quickly became one of the Foundation's most successful initiatives. Word of the program spread, and other organizations started asking if they could replicate it. Maya worked with the Foundation team to create a toolkit that other nonprofits could use, making the program's benefits available to young people far beyond those directly served by the Foundation. As the program's success grew, Maya found herself being invited to speak at conferences and universities. She was interviewed by magazines and podcasts, always careful to frame her work in the context of the Foundation's broader mission while establishing her own expertise. Gradually, public perception began to shift. She was no longer just Richard's girlfriend. She was Maya, an innovative program director doing important work in educational equity. Richard supported her success with genuine pride, never trying to take credit or insert himself into her spotlight. He attended her speaking engagements when he could, sitting in the audience like any other attendee, and he celebrated each of her accomplishments as if they were his own. On a Tuesday evening nearly a year after that first conversation in the diner, Maya finished her shift and found Richard waiting for her, as he always did. But instead of sitting in his usual booth, he was standing by the door, holding a small box. "I have something for you," he said, and there was nervousness in his voice that Maya had never heard before. He led her outside to where his car was parked, and in the back seat, Maya saw something covered with a blanket. Richard pulled back the blanket to reveal a painting, beautifully framed. It was a scene of the diner at night, lights glowing warmly through the windows, rain falling on the street outside. It was exactly how the diner had looked the first night Richard had walked in. "I commissioned this," Richard explained. "Because this place, this moment changed my life. You changed my life. I wanted to capture that." Maya felt tears in her eyes. "It's beautiful." "There's more," Richard said, and he opened the small box. Inside was a key. "I bought the building that houses the diner. Danny's been worried about the landlord raising the rent and potentially having to close. I've secured the lease for him indefinitely at a fair rate. The diner will always be here, will always be a place where people can come for good food and honest conversation." "Richard," Maya breathed, overwhelmed. "I'm not done," he said, smiling nervously. He reached into his pocket and pulled out another small box, and this time Maya knew what was inside before he opened it. "Maya, over the past year, you've made me a better person. You've helped me remember what matters and build something meaningful. You've challenged me and supported me and loved me for who I am, not what I have. I can't imagine my life without you in it." He opened the box, revealing a simple but elegant ring. "I know we come from different worlds, and I know people will judge us and question us, but I also know that what we have is real and valuable and worth fighting for. Will you marry me?" Maya looked at the ring, at Richard's hopeful face, at the painting of the diner where their story had begun. She thought about everything they'd been through, all the ways they'd grown together, all the challenges they'd faced and overcome. She thought about her mother's advice to take a chance on happiness, and about Christina's encouragement to stay true to herself. "Yes," she said, and Richard's face lit up with joy. "Yes, I'll marry you." He slipped the ring on her finger and kissed her, and from inside the diner, Danny and several of the regulars who had been watching through the window erupted in applause. Maya laughed, realizing they'd been in on the plan. Danny came outside, beaming. "About time," he said, hugging them both. "I've been waiting for this for months." "You knew?" Maya asked. "He asked my permission first," Danny said. "Old-fashioned, but I appreciated it. Plus, he told me about buying the building. Man who'd do that just to make sure your workplace is secure, that's a man who loves you properly. Over the next few months, Maya and Richard planned a wedding that reflected both of their values. It wasn't a grand society affair, but a meaningful celebration with the people who mattered most to them. They held it at the foundation's office, surrounded by the students and staff whose lives had been changed by the work they'd built together. Gave a speech about how the foundation had transformed his life and how Maya and Richard's partnership embodied the values of mutual respect and shared purpose. Christina served as one of Maya's bridesmaids, having become a close friend over the past year. Maya's mother walked her down the aisle, proud and glowing, healthy and happy thanks to the medical care Maya could now afford. The ceremony was simple but heartfelt. When it came time for the vows, Richard spoke first. Maya, you saw me when I'd forgotten how to see myself. You reminded me that worth isn't measured in dollars, but in how we treat people and what we build together. You've made me want to be better, do better, live better. I promise to spend the rest of my life being worthy of the trust you've placed in me. Maya's vows were equally simple. Richard, you believed in me when I didn't believe in myself. You gave me opportunities, but more importantly, you gave me the confidence to seize them. You've shown me that love isn't about perfect circumstances, but about imperfect people choosing each other every day. I promise to keep choosing you, to keep challenging you, to keep building with you, for as long as we both shall live. After the ceremony, instead of an expensive catered dinner, they served food from the diner. Danny had closed up for the day to cook for the wedding, and everyone agreed it was the best wedding food they'd ever had. The celebration was joyful and real, full of laughter and dancing and genuine happiness. As the evening wound down, Maya found herself standing with Richard on the balcony of the foundation office, looking out at the city lights. She was wearing her wedding dress, and he still had on his tuxedo, and they were both exhausted and happy. "Can you believe this?" Maya asked. "A year ago, I was just a waitress trying to make rent. Now I'm married to you, running programs that help thousands of people, finishing my degree. It's like a dream." "It's not a dream," Richard said. "It's what happens when someone extraordinary gets the opportunities they deserve. You did this, Maya. You built this life through your wisdom, your hard work, your integrity. I just helped open a few doors." "You opened a lot more than doors," Maya said. "You opened up possibilities I never knew existed." "We opened them together," Richard corrected. "That's the beautiful thing about us. We make each other better. We see what the other person needs and help them become it." They stood in comfortable silence for a while, watching the city. Then Maya said, "I want to expand the foundation's work. I've been thinking about it a lot. We're helping students, which is wonderful, but there are so many other people struggling to build better lives. Single parents trying to go back to school, people switching careers, older workers who've been displaced by technology. They need support too." Richard smiled. "I love that your wedding day isn't even over and you're already planning our next project." "Our next project," Maya repeated, liking the sound of that. "I like that we have projects, that we're building things together that matter." "Me too," Richard said. "So tell me about this expansion idea." And they stood there on the balcony, on their wedding night, talking about programs and impact and how to help more people build better lives. Because that was who they were together. Two people from different worlds who had found common ground in their shared belief that everyone deserved a chance to succeed, that wisdom could come from unexpected places, and that real wealth was measured not in bank accounts, but in lives changed and opportunities created. Years later, when people asked Maya about her unlikely love story with Richard, she would always smile and say the same thing. "He asked me for investment advice, and I gave it to him. The best investment either of us ever made was in each other." The foundation continued to grow, expanding its programs and reach. Maya completed her degree and eventually became the foundation's CEO when retired. Richard stayed involved but increasingly stepped back, content to let Maya lead while he focused on being the kind of father and grandfather his family deserved. The diner stayed open, a constant in their lives, a reminder of where their story began. They still went there every Tuesday evening, even decades later, sitting in the same booth, eating Danny's and talking about everything and nothing. The neighborhood around it gentrified over the years, but the diner remained unchanged, a touchstone of authenticity in an increasingly polished world. Graduated at the top of his class and went on to start his own business, a company that provided technology training to communities. He stayed close to Maya and Richard, eventually joining the foundation's board and bringing the perspective of someone who had been helped by the organization and understood its mission from personal experience. The foundation helped thousands of young people over the years, each one a story of potential realized, of barriers overcome, of dreams made possible. And at the center of it all was a simple truth that Maya had understood from the beginning, that real value isn't about how much money you have, but about what you do with whatever resources you're given. That wisdom doesn't require credentials, that the best advice sometimes comes from unexpected sources. That authentic connection transcends social and economic boundaries. On their 10th anniversary, Richard and Maya returned to the resort where Christina's wedding had been held, where they'd first acknowledged their feelings for each other. They sat on the same bench overlooking the vineyards, holding hands just as they had that night. "Do you ever regret it?" Richard asked. "Saying yes to all of this, your life would be simpler if you just stayed at the diner." Maya thought about it, really thought about it. She thought about the challenges they'd faced, the criticism she'd endured, the constant pressure of living in the public eye. She thought about the board meetings and the speeches and the endless demands on her time and energy. Then she thought about the foundation, about all the lives they'd changed. She thought about and the thousands of students like him who now had opportunities they wouldn't have had otherwise. She thought about Richard, about how they'd grown together, about the partnership they'd built that was based on mutual respect and shared values. She thought about her mother, healthy and happy, living in comfort she'd never known before. She thought about Christina and the friendship they'd developed, about being part of a family again. "No regrets," Maya said. "Not a single one. This life is harder than what I had before, but it's also richer in every way that matters. I wouldn't change anything." "Not even that first night when a stranger asked you to sit down and give him investment advice?" Richard asked with a smile. "Especially not that," Maya said. "That was the night everything changed. That was the night I learned that sometimes the universe puts people in your path for a reason. That was the night I started believing in possibilities." They sat together as the sun set over the vineyards, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink and gold. Two people from different worlds who had found each other in a small diner on a rainy night, who had built something meaningful together, who had proven that real connection transcends circumstance, and that love, when it's based on mutual respect and shared purpose, can bridge any divide. And somewhere in a diner on Maple Street, a new waitress was serving coffee to customers and dreaming of possibilities, just as Maya once had. Because that was the thing about dreams Maya had learned. They didn't require wealth or status or perfect circumstances. They just required belief, hard work, and sometimes a chance encounter that changed everything. The foundation Maya and Richard built together would continue long after they were gone, helping generation after generation of young people reach for their dreams. But the real legacy they left wasn't the programs or the scholarships or the buildings that bore their names. It was the proof that wisdom and value exist everywhere, in all people, if we're willing to listen and learn. That sometimes the best advice comes from the most unexpected sources. That authentic connection matters more than social status. That we all have something valuable to contribute, regardless of where we come from or how much money we have. Maya's story became something of a legend, told and retold in different versions. Some focused on the romance, the fairy tale of the waitress who married the billionaire. But those who knew the real story understood it was about something deeper. It was about recognizing value where others saw only service, about listening when others talked over, about building partnerships based on mutual respect rather than hierarchy, about remembering that wealth without purpose is meaningless, and that true richness comes from making a positive difference in the lives of others. And it all started with a simple question on a rainy Thursday night. "What do you recommend?" A question asked not just about food, but about life, about business, about what really matters. A question that opened a door between two worlds and changed everything that came after. That was the real investment advice Maya had given Richard that first night, though neither of them fully understood it at the time. Invest in people. Invest in relationships. Invest in wisdom wherever you find it. Invest in purpose over profit, in meaning over money, in authenticity over appearance. Those investments pay dividends that compound in ways no financial instrument ever could, creating value that lasts long after bank accounts have been emptied and buildings have crumbled. Maya understood that truth from living it, and she spent the rest of her life helping others understand it too. Not through lectures or books, though she eventually wrote some of those, but through action, through the foundation's work, through the example of how she lived her life. through showing up at the diner every Tuesday night, no matter how famous or successful she became, sitting in the same booth, eating the same, staying connected to where she came from and who she was. That was the answer that silenced everyone that rainy night in the diner, though it would take years for its full implications to unfold. Not a specific stock tip or market prediction, but a simple truth about value and worth, and what it means to invest in what truly matters. A truth that came from a place of lived experience rather than theoretical knowledge, from wisdom born of struggle rather than success. And in the end, it turned out to be the best investment advice anyone could give. Maybe her mother was right. Maybe it was time to take a chance her business degree. Her life was transforming in ways she'd never imagined possible, and yet she made sure to keep her feet on the ground, to stay connected to the things that mattered. "Probably right," he said, his voice a little rough. "Which is why I've made a decision. I wanted to tell you about it tonight to get your thoughts." When she talked about value and what mattered. He'd spent decades accumulating wealth, and somehow in the process he'd lost the ability to distinguish between price and worth. A waitress in a diner had reminded him of the difference in less than an hour of conversation. That was worth far more than $500. That was worth paying attention to.